Good morning. I want to talk briefly today about Son of Italy, Pascal D'Angelo. This is the story of a child, a kid, 14, 15 years old, who came to the United States from southern Italy, approximately in 1915, something like that. It is an autobiography. Autobiography is the story of your own life. But the paradoxical aspect of a written autobiography is that it really is more a biography of who you are at the time of your work, at the time when you write, reminisce, and talk about your past, than an actual biography of the events that occurred and even the way you perceived yourself and your life in those times. So it is an X-ray of who you are at the moment when you begin this enterprise. We all do this through the course of our lives. When we look back and we think about the most important, significant events, we do it through recollection, through memories. We, consciously or not, get rid of some of the memories and keep others. Not only, but we also give different meanings and different interpretations to some of the acts of our existence or some of the things that happened to us. It doesn't need to be explained. But if you just think of yourselves a few years ago, let's say that you were a teenager and you had, your first relationship, for instance, and you broke up. Maybe he or she broke up with you or vice versa. You had a reconstruction. You had at the time a series of reasons and motivations and understanding of what was going on to you. Then a few years later, if you look back, you certainly have a different perspective. Whether it is correct or not, it's immaterial. You may have been right the first time and you may be wrong now. But what is really relevant is that if you were to write about those experiences now, they would be necessarily filtered through your cumulative experience and your perception. Not only, but there is also one major aspect in everybody's life. We need to make sense out of the chaos of the things that happen to us. We cannot accept the fact that we are at the mercy of fate, so to speak, that things happen without a reason. We want to believe that to an extent we are in control of our existences. Therefore, we commit certain acts and we see the consequences of those acts. And we want to have a reason and a logic for those things. Because I did this, this happened to me. We could not survive without rationalization. We need to rationalize and find a logic. Or what is, to use a term that is commonly, frequently used right now, the term narrative. Everything, in a way, must fit into a narrative. If we look back, we, again, consciously or unconsciously, we discard the elements of our lives that do not fit into a narrative. If you are an honest person and you happen to shoplift maybe yesterday, that is something that you will not include in your self-perception of yourself. If you are a hoodlum and if you're a criminal and all of a sudden you had a gest of generosity, maybe that is the part that you don't want to acknowledge. I don't know. But we need to do this. We need to make sense of our lives. And this is what this book does. This person starts out as basically an illiterate peasant, arrives to the United States, and goes through an extremely difficult existence. I repeat, he was literally or almost illiterate. He barely spoke Italian. He spoke the local dialect. He came to America, lived here for a number of years, and in the end, he was able to write an autobiography in English. He became a published poet. He didn't know when he embarked in this venture that this would happen to him. When he wrote this autobiography, he looked back and he had to make sense of what happened to him. And this is that book. It tells you about his adventures, his misadventures, his hardships, all that went through. But the focal point is the attempt to make sense of his life. Now, there is a very famous quote from Shakespeare. It comes from Macbeth, and it is a very scary one. And it goes like this: life is a tale full of sound and fury, told by a madman and signifying nothing. And out of this nothing, that is the chaos of events that we cannot control, we try to find a meaning and a significance. This is what this book is about. I'm going to stop here for a second, and then I'll give you a real introduction to the essence and to the things to look for in the book. Okay, I'm back. And just because I was referring to memory as the resource that we all have, and that is the only guide we have in establishing and helping develop a narrative of our own existence. The very first page of this book is about the earliest memories of his life. We could take him as a catalog of events, but if you read that closely, you will see that there is a structure, and there is something that begins to percolate up from this very first page. He talks about the very first recollection, and that it is my first real recollection probably runs down to a little less than 4 years. For my grandmother died then. And I clearly remember when she made me go up to the garret to get onions in order to have them roasted under the hot cinders of the wood fire that we used in the place of a stove. I undoubtedly must have been winter, for it is in winter that such things are properly in use. So the very first memory is the memory of a loss, the memory of the grandmother. And as you go through the very first pages, you will see the memories are those of a frightened child surrounded by a terrifying world where events occur completely out of his control. Those are the memories, and that is the very deep stratum of his self-consciousness, and even beyond that, his subconscious. Read it carefully, and you will encounter a number of events that bring you into the psyche of this individual. This person is seeing himself as a little child at the mercy of events, and with very little support from the world around him. In these first chapters, even his family is a threat. When he is accused of an act that he did not commit as a child, he hurt another child, or another child got hurt, and he was accused of that. He was first and foremost afraid of the reaction of his own family, of his own father and mother, that they would pile up on him rather than defend him. He feels defenseless at the mercy of events, and he has no one to turn to. In these very same chapters, you will encounter also interesting characters. I am not going to spoil the fun, or maybe I should. I'll leave it like that. One of the most peculiar characters that you will encounter in these very first chapters is an old woman, a beggar, called the vampire. You will find a world of superstition, a world that is populated with magical forces, forces that nobody can control. It is very much the mentality of traditional societies, pre-industrialization, still societies and civilizations, but people who have to refer to explanations that go beyond the logic and the rational. And their world is full of magical spirits, of benign and malign and wicked entities. He refers to this magical world of prophets and seers and magicians and these, in this case, like the vampire. Look at that from that perspective. People have to assign a meaning to the events that otherwise have no explanation. A child falls sick and dies. There must be a reason. And the reason, in this case, is what you will read and the consequences that it has. Refer to this text as a guide through a world and a society that is dominated by this sort of impulse and need for explanations that are very different from the explanations that we have today. Before everything else, before we embark in reading Son of Italy, I have one recommendation. And the recommendation is to practice what is called deep reading. By deep reading, I mean reading slowly. And if you can, and if you have the time and the opportunity, read it out loud in your mind. You know what I mean. I am a very slow reader, an extremely slow reader, but I am a very, very careful and cautious reader. I take notes all the time. I write little things or I underline words. I couldn't even read the label of a bottle of mineral water without a little notebook and make notes on the side in order to focus and underline things that I read. And by doing that, I remember almost everything. I really remember an enormous amount of material and facts and ideas. By reading slowly, I have the time to make connections in my mind from the things that I already know, the thoughts that I have already had, and the new things that I'm reading about. By doing that, I reinforce both the memory of my knowledge, the things that I know, and I include in them the new elements that I acquire. And to me, that is the key to acquiring knowledge, acquiring understanding also, remembering facts. So make an effort, find a place that is quiet, that is not surrounded by noise and activities. Take those headphones out of your ears for a moment and focus on what you're doing. You're going to read only once. It might take you a little longer, but you will never have to go back, and you will always have a recollection, as far, of course, as you will have opportunities to, of the important things that are important for you. Out of this book, there will be many things that you will forget, the way I have. But I have retained the things that, to me, explain and provide the tools to develop my own interpretation and my own understanding of this entire text. So again, for this one as well as for the future ones, make an effort. Read slowly. Practice deep reading, and you will see the difference.